Bogdan Alexandrescu is the co-founder and VP of engineering at SAGA. SAGA is focused on lowering the barrier of entry for building in Web3 so that developers can spin up a chain with a single click. And they have an emphasis on the metaverse. In our conversation, we will dive deep into Bogdan's leap from Apple after 6 years for crypto full-time. Any advice that he has for anyone looking to make a similar switch, what the metaverse even is, more about SAGA and the current innovator program that they're running, and so much more. But before we get into that, Bogdan, please give us a brief overview of your current focus at SAGA.
Yeah, hi Tegan. Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. So SAGA's focus is on creating the infrastructure and basically the tooling and ecosystem benefits for developers, for game developers, application developers, Web3 use case developers to easily and effortlessly focus on building applications without actually having to care about building and maintaining the underlying infrastructure for it. We want to lower the barrier of entry for Web3 developers so that we can enable a lot more people to bring in ideas, innovation, and use cases, and with that grow the entire ecosystem. So that's kind of like that's at a very high level. That is the focus for SAGA. Of course, we can dive more deep into that.
Absolutely. And we will dive into that. Before we do, I want to chat a little bit about your previous experience. So you actually dedicated 6 years of your life to Apple. And while there, you were dabbling in crypto for a long time. But what finally made you make the switch over?
Right. Well, so to answer that question, I can tell it, I guess I have to start by discussing a bit of what I was doing in Web3 before actually choosing to jump in 100%. So like you said, I've been with Apple for 6 years. I've been in crypto for about 6-7 years as well. I've never actually dedicated my entire full time and attention to Web3 because, my background is technical. I eventually switched into technical leadership in the companies, big tech companies that I worked in Silicon Valley. But at the same time, I've been very drawn to what was going on in Web3. And before that, it was called blockchain. And before that, it was just Bitcoin. So yes, there is an evolution here of terminology as well. But to cut it short, I've been mostly focused on investing, on in some cases running infrastructure for different projects. I spent most of my past 6-7 years being an angel, supporting teams take off the ground, supporting them financially, but also with technical advisory and other type of resources that the team will need to actually get off the ground and get from 0 to 1 or grow eventually, depending on the team. So that was an activity that didn't require my full time and attention. It was more of a part-time involvement. But there was always something missing. There was always, I was an observer looking at other people build, spending time building amazing use cases and having fun while doing it. And I can't say I wasn't a bit jealous of jumping in and actually creating something of my own. And you know this very well. I've resisted that for a long time for many reasons. Things at Apple were very exciting as well. I mean, Apple is building amazing things and is, as you now, I mean, a lot of people know already, it's one of the most well-known and strongest like tech company out there. And that doesn't come without, a lot of brain power and a lot of innovation going in there, right? So there was definitely a great school for me in many ways, and a place where I was able to grow and develop. But it gets to a point where you have two passions, and sometimes they're not 100% aligned. So this was the case with big tech, Web 2, aka Apple. What I was doing, I was in the leadership team, but I was focused on infrastructure. And what was happening in Web3, where I saw the need for infrastructure. I saw the need for, there are gaps that needed to be filled by projects and technology that was simply not there. So that eventually made me look very carefully at the possibility of entering crypto, entering Web3 full-time and building.
Amazing. And then what specifically about crypto? Was it the ethos of crypto, the values of crypto, or you just saw like an opportunity for innovation? What was it specifically?
I think it was the opportunity for innovation. I think it was also the freedom of just, discovering new ways to improve people's lives, to improve society, to improve even business processes. Starting with 2016 and then 2017, removing the middleman, and then getting from that to the next level where we are today, and we have been for a few years already. I think there is a lot of potential in this new technological wave. There's a lot of potential. There's a lot of room to grow, and I see a lot of smart people as well. So it attracts a lot of big brains, so to speak. So it's a place where you can restart your growth if you feel like you're stalling, if you feel like you got too comfortable. So that's and this has been my modus operandi, the way I functioned for the past 20 years. I like to jump in new projects or new areas or new industries, and then learn and develop and grow and potentially help if I can. So this was yet another one of those. But I think it's more than that. I think Web3 is not just a temporary thing. It is becoming the next evolution of the digital world, the internet as we know it. And this time I want to be there from the start and hopefully lay some bricks at the foundation of that.
Amazing. That's exciting. And I know you alluded to some of the stuff that's happening within Apple, and I want to get to that in a minute. But before we do, I want to kind of double click into your role as VP of engineering. What made you choose to go from being an engineer to a manager? That's a big switch. What is it about managing that you like?
I mean, that happened a long time ago, but I would say engineering is fun. And you can do so much as an engineer, regardless of how far you can go on the engineering ladder. Eventually, two heads are better than one. Alone you can go faster, but together you can go further. You know how this is I know it sounds like buzzwords, but it's true actually, and I've seen this in practice many times. And I like to work with people. I like to help others grow, and through their growth, the company and the organization in which you function or you lead grows with. So I found that as another episode in my life, another area where I didn't have a lot of experience and I wanted to grow into. So that made me choose to basically take that step forward and go into management with the goal of bettering myself, helping others around me get better, and also create more impact basically do more than I was doing by myself as an individual. So that was part of the motivation.
That's great. Yeah, it's great to kind of mentor those on your team and help people rise up to be new leaders in the industry. I guess with that, Apple controls the app market, which is a big thing, right? They have the app store, they decide who gets on it, who doesn't. And I think personally that a decentralized app store is a huge need within the industry. And we need, of course, a moderation protocol on top of that decentralized app store, of which Apple could be one of many moderators.
Right.
So is there a world where you could have stayed within Apple and worked on some of these initiatives? Do you think they would have been open to it?
100%. And I think actually Apple is going there, is going on that route. We don't have that visible right now. It's not, I would say, yet released. But if you look at the public information that's out there, because I'm not going to be able to release anything internally, but if you look at the public information that's out there, we already are seeing some telltales or signs of where Apple is taking its products and services next. And we were going to be talking about Web3 and metaverse and the next version of cyberspace and whatnot. But it's already becoming visible that Apple is moving towards integration with blockchain, towards bringing AR and VR in their product lines. And things like even like trademark and patents around Reality One and Reality Pro. We all know where this is going. So I think Apple has been always striving for quality, for being the best at what they do, even if they're not necessarily the first. And I think if the world is moving in one direction, Apple is eventually going to lead that direction.
Yeah. And I think you have to question if there's patents in Web3, is it really Web3? But I guess with that, why did you decide to leave and not stay within Apple?
I think, that's a very good question. The speed at which things happen. I think I wanted to do things faster, and maybe also the focus. I wanted to build infrastructure, and I wanted to build an infrastructure that is open, free, available, and basically ready to use for everyone, not necessarily just for one company. Apple, like I said, is building great quality products and services, and they want to have control over that quality. In an open market, in an open environment, that is sometimes harder to enforce, harder to make sure it exists. And we can look at what happened over the past few months in Web3 and see that some checks and balances sometimes are needed for many reasons, including customer security and safety and privacy. So Apple is making a lot of is putting a lot of effort in protecting user privacy and also making sure that their services and products are of top leading quality in the space. So for that, you need some control. And I think they're going to end up having eventually finding a balance, especially when they start getting more and more into this Web3 space. They're going to have to find a balance between control and openness. And I think that's coming.
Yeah. I think Web3 at the core of it is really about giving that control to the users, but we will need bridges to that world. And so I think Apple can play a really great role in that. And then, and I empathize too. When I left Barclays, I left for the same reason. Even though Barclays was doing sandbox stuff within the blockchain space, I really wanted to move quickly and build from the inside. But with that, do you think others will follow our footsteps by leaving big tech and finance and join the crypto space? And what advice do you have to anyone thinking about it?
This is a question that was that I myself was being asked a few years back before I actually decided to join. And I was asking myself as well, when is the right time? And I've learned that over the years that the right time is now. If you're thinking about it, if you think that you're going to be able to provide significant contributions and that space is going to be is going to help you grow and better yourself as well, then it's the right time to join. Now, of course, it's very important to choose where you go as well. You have to look at what's available and choose wisely. You have to you can just go to the first company or the first Web3 project that is hiring, right? So there is a need for doing a bit of due diligence. Try to do some market research, companies, do research on the companies that are hiring and figuring out what is the right fit for you. Look at their mission. Like, what are they trying to achieve? What are they trying to change? What's their vision? Is that vision aligning with your goals? Is that vision aligning with your values? And if that's the case, then start looking at the team. Is that team the right team you want to work with? do you think you're going to be able to do amazing things together? And at the end of the day, are you going to feel fulfilled about what you're working on? It's a very fast pace. And I like that. Some people like that. Some people don't like that. Some people like to be comfortable. Some people like to be challenged. So it really depends, again, if it makes sense for you. But I think when it comes to the right time to join, there hasn't been a better time to join, to be honest. And even if, there's some naysayers about like, well, we're in a bear market and, it's harder in a bear market because you don't see, crazy valuations going up left and right. I actually tend to disagree with that. I think that's the best time to join because there are less distractions and you can actually focus on building the right things. It's the right time to hire as well. And as we have seen over the past few months, there's a lot of talent on the market. So some of that talent will look into Web3. And again, it's the right time to join.
I agree. Yeah, I think during a bear market is actually the best time to join because projects still hire, though they just get a lot more selective on who they hire. And oftentimes the roles that they're hiring for are key roles where you're providing fundamental value. So you actually have a lot more job security if you join during a bear market than if you join during a bull market. So completely agree.
Considerable, potential upside, right, for some of these projects rather than joining at the top of the market. And that's similar to Web2 as well. If we look at what happened to companies like Meta or Amazon or Google, or the whole market is 40% down, right? So it wasn't the best time to join at the top of the market, but now it's a great time to join some of these startups in Web3.
Absolutely. And then kind of shifting gears to the recent blow up within centralized finance that we've seen, not just one, but many, with FTX, Alameda, Three Arrows Capital, Celsius, Voyager, the list goes on and on. What do you say to those watching that are currently discouraged by these events that have kind of unfolded?
Well, first of all, this is going to sound a bit controversial, maybe. I do not consider those entities part of Web3. Let me explain why. Technically, they're not Web3 projects. They're Web2 companies, fintech companies that have that are providing services for Web3, but they themselves are not actually fully Web3 end-to-end companies. They're centralized entities with a centralized governing structure. They have a CEO. They have there is no community that governs those projects, right? There is no transparency. There hasn't been. So that's definitely not an attribute of Web3. It's definitely an attribute of Web2. Most of them, most of these companies that you just mentioned were, without us knowing, functioning more in a gray zone than being completely clean and honest to their customers and whatnot. So I would say from the perspective of looking at these 4 or 5 different events that happened over the past few months, it's unfortunate. I think we need more regulation in the space to protect from this type of businesses going into the market and attracting a lot of user funds and managing them the way they do. There is regulation for this in traditional finance, but this is looked at as a kind of like a gray area where, unfortunately, people that have the power and the visibility, they can take advantage. So I think more regulation, more focus on protecting user rights, privacy, and I guess financial wellness will be needed, and I think they will actually come to fruition. We've seen this in traditional finance as well. If you look back in history, the same exact things happen, just like 50, 60, 70 years ago, or even further in time if we look at it. We're seeing the same thing here again, and the natural evolution will be that some things are going to be regulated. Now, another way of looking at it is it's also eye-opening. More and more Web3 users are seeing these entities as for what they are, for what they really are, which they're not Web3 projects. They're not in Web3. They're centralized entities, and they see more and more the advantages of Web3. If you look at DeFi protocols or DeFi projects out there that provide exchanges, provide financial services and whatnot, the level of transparency is unmatched. And some of these centralized exchanges now are looking at getting some of that, like, proof of transparency, proof of reserves, and what's been going on with Binance and a few other exchanges that are trying to lead this effort moving forward. So in a way, it's painful. This literally is the definition of growing pains. But I think we're moving in the right direction. People are going to be more careful with lending money to centralized entities that don't have any auditing, any transparency. And they're going to most likely move towards more of a decentralized, more towards decentralized protocols for finance as well. So overall, I'm actually bullish for the entire Web3 ecosystem because, again, it filters out the scammers, it filters out the thieves. I'm not going to name names, but everyone knows who they are. It's very disappointing, but at the same time, we all learn and move forward, and we're going to be better at the end of this. On the other side.
Absolutely. Yeah, maybe everyone except the New York Times, but I digress. I would say...
Yeah, someone needs to look for another job over there, or the editorial staff needs to do a better due diligence on what they're actually pushing out.
Totally. But I do agree that it is a great lesson on decentralization and self-custody. And when it comes to regulations, a lot of the regulators were focused on DeFi, but DeFi was fine, right? You have Uniswap, it runs, it's very transparent, it doesn't hold client funds. Meanwhile, CeFi has this big issue. And so I think the regulators need to shift their focus to decentralized entities where it is very opaque.
Aave's latest deployment, V3, was launched on 6 networks and introduces new features like isolation mode, efficiency mode, and portals. Explore the protocol at aave.com, and if you're building in the ecosystem, apply for a grant through aavegrants.org.
6 years into crypto, you finally just made the leap full-time into crypto. You left Apple to co-found SAGA. Can you tell us a little bit more about SAGA? And, you really could have gone anywhere. So why SAGA?
I've been asked this question many times. And I asked this question myself first, like, why would I choose SAGA versus the handful of other options I had at the time when I was looking at moving into Web3. And by the way, this is not the first time I looked into moving into Web3. There was also the 2017, 2018, and 2019 era, I guess, of blockchain where some of my best and closest friends did make the jump. And I decided to stay on the sidelines and just look at what was going on. Not that I am more risk averse, but I was just, I think I wasn't ready. I think I still had some growing to do, which I did over the past, 5 years. Looking at SAGA, I can tell you right off the bat, it was the people. It was the team. I like the fact that it was an infrastructure project. I like the fact that it that is right now, and it even from when I was looking at it from its vision and mission and what is what's the plan. I felt like it was filling a gap that we currently have in the entire ecosystem that no one is building, no one is actually tackling the way we were planning to do it. But at the end of the day, it was not the product, it was not the vision, it was the team. Because things change, right? The market changes. You need to be able to adjust. If you're working with the right team, the right group of people, if you're surrounded by strong leaders with a lot of experience and that work well together, then you can pivot. And you can find ways to provide value to the ecosystem, even if the initial product idea or vision is not necessarily what you end up building. So going back to why I chose SAGA, it was the founding team. I spent 2.5 months with them before actually choosing to officially join. So it's been for me a long due diligence process, maybe longer than a lot of people are doing. But I wanted to make sure I am making the right decision. Leaving Apple was a big choice to make. And I am not regretting 1 minute making that decision. It's been an amazing ride so far, and I'm surrounded by strong leaders that are basically taking the charge, I would say, holding the banner and moving things forward, not just for Saga, but for the entire ecosystem we're operating in.
Amazing. Yeah. And I think that decentralized infrastructure is probably one of the biggest needs that people need to be focusing on right now. So it's great that you kind of identified that need. And then one segment of Web3 is the metaverse. And the Saga white paper talks a lot about the metaverse and the multiverse. And there are a lot of different ideas out there around what the metaverse is. Facebook calls itself the metaverse. What's your high level vision for the metaverse?
High level vision. Well, I can tell you one thing. And I will be brutally honest. No one knows what the metaverse is, but there are many definitions out there of what metaverse could be. This is not the first time this has happened, by the way. If you look back in the 90s, people were calling it cyberspace. And again, people didn't know what cyberspace was. Was it the fact that you could send an email over two very distant, remote, machines, or you have a website that potentially now can link to other websites? All of that was being developed, and at that point, we didn't know what cyberspace will look like. If you look at what is right now, the World Wide Web has changed so much, and in ways in which we would not have imagined back in the 90s that it would. So when people say, well, so what is the metaverse? We don't know what the metaverse will be in 10 years from now. But I can tell you there are a few hints of where this is going. And they're all pretty exciting. Some could call metaverses the games we have today. They, in some ways, they're worlds, they're virtual worlds in which people can meet all over the world and interact with each other. So in a way, it increases the way we interact in cyberspace, right? From just clicking and texting and potentially video calling to actually interacting in a virtual space. But that's not stopping there. Other people are looking at metaverse as potentially bringing the digital world into your real world. So if you look at Apple, for example, because you mentioned it earlier, and it's focused on AR. So that's another area where I think there's going to be a lot of development moving forward.
Yeah, Facebook. You're saying Facebook's focused on AR,
and Facebook and Meta, I guess, building their own. Facebook is mostly focused on VR. I would say they're building their own set of worlds, focusing more on productivity. Apple is going to be focusing probably more on AR, so augmented reality and how to merge the digital world with your real world that surrounds you. And you can see, Gemini, you can see Microsoft, you can see, other companies, Google, spending time in building their own versions of the metaverse. If you look at, some people are defining the metaverse as we saw it in Ready Player One, right? A huge digital world where everyone basically functions in the same kind of world and it's all controlled by like this one entity. I don't think that's the future. I don't think that's going to be where it's at. It's almost like saying that the internet is Google. The internet is not Google, right? Google is is one of the main actors in the World Wide Web that is building infrastructure and tooling and interfaces and experiences for the users in the World Wide Web. Is going to be similar for the future of Web3 as well. We're going to have big players that are going to build experiences, potentially very different and very focused. Maybe some for productivity and work-life experience. Some might focus on like entertainment. Imagine a world where instead of going to the movies and seeing a 3D movie, you're going to the movies and you're actually part of it. Maybe as an observer, but inside the scene, or potentially even interacting with and changing the course of that movie that you're watching. So all of that could potentially be where the metaverse is going to go. I think it's going to be exciting. It also opens up entirely new markets, entirely new ways to create revenue for companies, for people to engage with each other, even from like across the world, long distance, or new ways to entertain ourselves or to learn for kids, or for us adults to work, to do our work. So again, very vague, and as it should be, because if anyone claims right now that they know what the metaverse is, they're most likely wrong.
Totally. I think that, the metaverse should be built on decentralized infrastructure so that, it can be composable and modular across all of these different ecosystems. And I think, trying to control the metaverse is a losing game personally.
Yeah, I mean, like if you think about the internet was meant to be a decentralized, attack-proof, self-sustaining computer network, right? It did get there to some extent, but then you have these huge corporations that have taken over and created I guess sub networks that are under their control.
Totally.
But overall, there is no one entity that controls the World Wide Web, and I think that's going to be the same with Web3.
Yeah, I think the problem with the current internet is that we didn't think through the incentive structures before creating the internet, and then we had to kind of do it as a second task.
Right.
The great thing about Web3 is we're really thinking about the incentive models before building decentralized protocols, which I think is powerful.
Right. It's a transition to an internet of value.
Totally. And you mentioned earlier on that SAGA is very developer friendly and that it's really lowering the barrier to entry so that, developers can launch their own chains.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us a little bit about what that experience is like currently?
Right. So a few months ago, we launched our first release called AlphaNet Andromeda, which is a developer tool that allows developers to spin up chains in a few seconds. Like it's extremely fast, and right now supports EVM. So anything that can run on Ethereum, for example, or Polygon or Avalanche can run on Saga chainlets instantly. They're 100% compatible. So the current release allows developers to spin up their chains and then deploy and build their Web3 experience on top in a shared fashion with, for example, teams that are decentralized and distributed across geographic locations. So they can basically spin up their infrastructure and then start actually just focusing on building the Web3 use case. It may be a game, it may be a metaverse world, it may be an entertainment use case, or even DeFi for that matter, which is not necessarily our focus, our primary focus, but we are there to support all Web3 developers. We see more and more games and game developers and metaverse developers coming in asking for this type of infrastructure or service, because the nature of their use cases require to have either, again, dedicated block space, high throughput, control over their infrastructure cost, and potentially also allowing them for a custom economic model that current layer one shared blockchains do not offer. So going back to what Saga is currently offering, it's the first release, which allows you to actually get familiarized with how having your own chain and building an application on your own chain will look like, and kind of get a flavor and test that workflow, and of course the benefits that come with it.
Amazing. Yeah. And I want to double click into a little bit of the tooling that you plan to add around Saga in a moment. But before then, so how I understand it is that developers spin up these chainlets, which acts as a chain that's secured by the Saga mainnet.
Yeah, we call them chainlets, but they're basically full layer one chains.
Okay, amazing. So with that, it's quite similar to a Polkadot or the Atom 2.0 proposal in Cosmos. So what is the advantage that you see kind of building this yourself instead of using like an Atom 2.0?
Right. So when you compare, you would have to compare each one individually, to be honest, because the Polkadot ecosystem and the Atom ecosystem are pretty different. And then the share security model in both of them are actually pretty different. I would say we are closely related to the Atom share security model, which is called interchain security. And SAGA's share security is going to be built on top of that. The difference, though, and I can also do a comparison with Polkadot in just a minute, but the difference between the hub and the share security of the hub and what SAGA is providing is we do not require a governance process for adding a new chain to a shared validator set to basically for a consumer chain, because that's the term, a consumer chain to register to a provider chain and get basically borrow that security from the hub or from other chains for that matter. That takes long. It's a long process. It's a sometimes costly process. And as we just saw yesterday, the Atom 2.0 proposal was actually rejected, which is unfortunate. But that comes with decentralized governance and with participation or lack of participation in the voting process. So if you look from that perspective, there are still huge barriers of entry for developers to that are building Web3 use cases to get their own chain. We want, like I said earlier, as part of our vision, is to lower the barrier of entry for developers and get them to be able to spin up their own chain as easy as it is to fire a transaction or click on a button. And that's only going to be possible if we automate, we add innovation in a few layers of innovation in the orchestration and automation of spinning up new chains.
On the Atom 2 proposal being rejected, from my understanding, it wasn't because of the concept of the shared security. It was more because there was a lot of subjective language in that proposal, and also that it kind of gave centralized powers a bit too much power. Can you double click into that? Do you think it'll revive itself?
Oh, I definitely think it's going to come back. It's going to be most likely maybe rewarded and then put to vote again. I think they as in the community, as the Cosmos community, will want to incentivize more people to actually take part in the voting process, because there was a lot of a lack of participation from the community side. So it's not that the Atom 2 proposal and white paper doesn't have a value. It's extremely valuable. I think it's the next evolution of Cosmos, Cosmos ecosystem as a whole. But that also tells you, it gives you an idea of some of the struggles and some of the downsides of having a governance process gating access to share security. And that's something that's going to still be there. It's not going away. So it's meant to be this way because of the model that the hub is proposing versus what SAGA is proposing.
Yeah,
and how, I can go into that and why it's different, but
I would love that. Yeah, how is SAGA thinking about governance, and how are you implementing that?
So for SAGA, I would say we will have a governance process when it comes to what types of chains can be run on top of the SAGA platform. Just to reiterate, let me go back a bit. So SAGA is meant to be a chain to launch chains that provides, again, guaranteed dedicated block space, but also comes with a swappable execution environment. So we're talking about VMs here. So it's going to be a multi-VM environment where you can spin up EVM or potentially Solana or Move VM, Aptos, SUI, different flavors, JavaScript and whatnot. So we're going to basically look at providing infrastructure for all developers out there, not just for a subsection of developers that know how to code Viper or Solidity or let's say Rust for Solana, and that's it, right? So I wanted to share this because I think this is important for the next part of my answer. In order for this chainlet stacks, let's call them, to be available, to be made available on the SAGA platform, they have to go through an audit process and a governance proposal. You can think about this as very similar to how the Apple App Store works, but the governance part is actually decentralized, not decided by, let's say, a committee of reviewers hired by Apple internally. So with SAGA, that's where governance comes in play. The difference from how the hub runs things is that once a chainlet stack is vetted, there's no real security risk for spinning up instances of that chainlet stack across the SAGA platform. Whereas with every single chain that you add on the hub, there has to be a governance proposal and there has to be a clear audit, because every single one of those every single one of those app chains in the hub, they have different code, different logic. They can run different type of potentially malicious code as well, right? So there is a need to gate that onboarding by a review process and a governance vote, right? So that's where SAGA actually changes things, right? Once you have a stack that's approved, you can support an entire ecosystem automatically, and that's where I think the lowering the barrier of entry comes in.
Got it. And then why not Polkadot?
So the Polkadot model. Well, I mean, this might sound a bit controversial, but I don't think it's scalable. Similar to how other side chains of like Ethereum, like let's say, I don't know, Avalanche or Binance Smart Chain, for example, have built these ecosystems on shared public chains. Polkadot basically does the same with a relay chain. So if you think about there are different levels of scalability with Polkadot that can be addressed. First of all, you only have 100 parachain slots. Then you can talk about, well, yeah, okay, but you have parathreads. Sure, you have parathreads, but parathreads compete for block space, compete for getting their unsealed blocks, eventually sealed and stored on the relay chain. But at the core of the Polkadot ecosystem stands the relay chain, and the relay chain is actually what is it? It's basically a public shared blockchain. So at the core of it, it's still a public shared blockchain. The more use cases you throw at it, the more you're going to have a higher cost of running on it. And eventually that cannot scale to support things like, high throughput use cases like gaming, like metaverses, like basically where our focus is. Mm-hmm. If you look at SAGA is horizontal scalability for blockchain. Every single chainlet is actually a new dedicated block space added to the platform. And technically, it can have unlimited scalability. You can get unlimited blockchain space or block space, basically. And that's where things differ.
Web3 is weighed down by fragmented experiences, becoming more of an obstacle for users rather than a warm invitation. Core seeks to erase these points of friction. Built by the team behind Avalanche, Core is an all-in-one command center for Web3, supporting Avalanche, Ethereum, and Bitcoin, a rich ecosystem of dApps, Bitcoin and Ethereum bridges, NFTs, subnets, and more. Download the Core browser extension to get started and connect to the Core web to unlock additional features at core.app.
When you decided to co-found SAGA and announce that to the community, a lot of people within the ETH community had some things to say about it. So why not build within the Ethereum community, build on the layer 2? What made you choose to go a different path?
Well, we are supporting Ethereum developers. Actually, that's a good point. We chose to go with our first execution layer to be actually the EVM. So all of the use cases that currently run on top of Ethereum can be supported on top of SAGA as well. That being said, we're not competing with Ethereum. We're actually looking at providing an extendable block space for a project that could run, for example, on Ethereum or Polygon or Avalanche or any EVM compatible chain. Another thing that we looked at in order to, again, support and extend support for the Ethereum ecosystem and other ecosystems similar, again, that I mentioned we're planning to support in the future in terms of additional VMs and whatnot, is the economic model that we support on top of the SAGA platform. I didn't go into that, but I think we're one of the few that, or very few, or probably the only one that actually has this model, where we decided to decouple the infrastructure cost from the user and from the developer. We have a two-tier system. You can call it a two-tier, but it's basically you have something that we call a front-end economic model and fee structure, and then a back-end or infrastructure economic model. In SAGA, the developer pays for the infrastructure cost, not the end user. So you as an end user having to interact with a Web3 application, in the current world, you have to pay for every single transaction you do to interact with that Web3 application. It's a model that doesn't work in Web2, and most likely a model that doesn't work in real life when we look at worldwide adoption. You wouldn't want to pay, for example, a transaction fee for opening your Uber app or for doing a search on Amazon. Similar to that, you wouldn't want to pay for interacting with a Web3 application just because you're doing let's say a query, or you're sending a message to someone, or you're ordering a service. So we are applying the same model and principles that we're used to in Web 2. So in this case, if Uber, for example, wants to go into Web 3, they can apply the same model that they've gotten their customers used to in the past 6-7 years, where they support the infrastructure costs, and we make sure that they have not just the control over the infrastructure costs, but also predictable costs, right? Because they have dedicated block space. While at the same time, on the front end, you, me, all the users that are actually interacting with their products, they can be in control of the user experience. They don't have to be tied into a world where, to a model where the user has to pay for the actual infrastructure at variable rates, I may add. So that's kind of like the difference. Also, that makes SAGA appealing to so many game developers and metaverse developers as well, is the fact that they can choose the economic model they want to apply to their chains. And in this case, let's say, for example, they do want to still have a fee for each transaction that happens on the chain for various reasons. They can choose what token that is. If they want to be Ethereum, they can use Ethereum. If they want to use USDC or USDT, simple just dollars, they can use that. We don't enforce what token will be used on a specific chain or app chain that's running on top of SAGA. That's the developer choice.
Okay, but the thing is, with Web 2, we didn't pay because we were the product, right? And then we kind of paid with our data, and then they used, they made billions of dollars off of just selling ads, a lot of Web 2 companies. So I guess with SAGA, how are you thinking about that? Will there be a SAGA token to help you pay for the security and the validation? How are you thinking about that?
Yes. So in terms of security, yes, there's going to be the same. We're basically a Web3 company, right? So we are going to have a utility token that's going to power the platform. Is going to be the flowing blood of the platform, and it's going to secure the SAGA platform itself. It's going to be what SAGA validators are going to be paid in to run the infrastructure. It's going to be what is going to be used for governance as well. For example, governance proposals and whatnot, similar to what is happening right now with the Atom Hub and other blockchain projects like Ethereum and whatnot. So very similar model there. We, on the front end, we are just providing more flexibility to the developer and the users to employ just more types of economic models than what is currently available on layer one shared public blockchains.
Got it. Okay. And then talk a little bit about tooling. So a lot of the established layer one blockchains are still light years behind the tooling within Ethereum when it comes to wallets, decentralized indexing, adoption of just infrastructure on these centralized finance platforms. How are you planning to tackle tooling within SAGA?
Well, so some of the efforts that SAGA and our engineering team that I run at SAGA is focusing on is, of course, developer tooling. Like I said, Andromeda is a developer tool. And we are focusing on building not just the platform, but also developer tooling around again, going to the same vision, lowering the barrier of entry for developers and leading the space in that direction. So you can imagine in the next months and over the next year to see tooling for game developers, for example, Unity plugins, Unreal Engine plugins, integration with indexing services, with RPC providers, with building SDKs to make integration with the SAGA chain just as simple as an import. So things like that. So there is a lot of thought process and effort going into researching and then applying that into actual products or services SAGA is building for developers, because it's not just the actual platform that you need to build. Yes, at the core of it, it's the platform and the infrastructure we're providing, but you need to also provide the gateways into that, and even the training in the developer community to use that as well. So we're looking at many ways to lower that barrier of entry for developers, and one of them is tooling, for sure.
Yeah, and do you think you'll activate and empower the community to help build some of that tooling?
Yes, 100%. We're actually so some of the innovators that we have in our innovator program, which, by the way, today just hit 3 digits. We're right now at 100, actually going over 100 at this point, innovators in our ecosystem. So blockchain companies, blockchain projects, game developers, metaverse developers that are joining and building on SAGA. Some of them are actually already providing some of this tooling to the blockchain community, and they're joining the innovator program and working with SAGA so that they can build those same products with SAGA or on top of SAGA. So yes, we're working with the ecosystem and with third-party providers to build that. We're not just doing it ourselves. It's more of a community-wide effort.
Amazing. Can you tell us a little bit about that innovator program? Who should join? What's the benefit of joining? Maybe for some listeners out there that could have interest.
Yeah. So the innovator program is basically a community of builders and innovators in Web3. It's mostly, but not only, focused on game developers, metaverse builders, entertainment use case builders, but it's not limited to that. Like I said, we have companies that are in the areas of building developer tooling and services and other type of products that are not necessarily games and metaverses. But it's a community of builders. It's a community of innovators. The benefits, some of them I would outline, are well, first of all, access to our technology before anyone else. So our innovators get access to control availability releases that are not necessarily public releases, but they get to taste our technology and onboard to it faster than everyone else in the ecosystem. They can also that also helps us to test some of our ideas and basically get fast feedback so that we can iterate over our products and deliver a better overall experience for our developers. They have access to potential grants. They have access to other innovators. They have access to investors. We do close calls almost twice a month now with investors, and they have a chance to pitch their idea to get additional support, either from the SAGA team or from our community of investors or advisors as well. And there are co-marketing opportunities. We basically help each other a lot, and it's a community that's basically now working and helping each other grow. So it's it has been extremely interesting to see how fast this community has grown over the past 3 months. It's literally breathtaking, but it's really rewarding to see how many people are joining in and helping each other and collaborating.
BitRefill allows you to shop online and physically without your bank and convert your crypto into merchant balance directly. It offers more than 5,000 gift card options in 180 countries, and in the US, you can now pay bills, including your mortgage or credit card. Creating a BitRefill account is not required, but only takes 1 minute, and you can get 1% back in rewards.
I think one of the great things about Web3 is that the early adopters, they actually get rewarded for early contributions, unlike Web2, whereas if you were early to TikTok or Twitter, you didn't get anything really for that, for being early there.
That's true.
So will there be a token that's dropped to the innovator program?
Will there be a token? Oh, like an airdrop. We don't have a plan for that at this point. So I can't tell you if there's going to be an airdrop. But we're definitely looking at many different options to have a wider participation in the entire ecosystem and have more people actually onboarded to the ecosystem, onboarded to the token, trying it out. And so on. You can think about, we're looking at having more and more developers on the SAGA platform, running app chains and running Web3 use cases. So we're definitely going to look at how to better support that. Maybe it's not going to be an airdrop. Maybe it's going to be an earn drop. Maybe it's going to be some sort of contribution-based drop. We're looking at many different options. But yeah, definitely we're going to look at ways to have higher adoption.
Totally. I think earn tokens over free tokens any day. It's much more appreciated. And then with that, we spoke a lot about the relationship between SAGA and Cosmos. Do you consider SAGA to be part of the Cosmos interchain ecosystem, or do you view it as kind of a separate ecosystem that connects to Cosmos?
So in some ways, yes. And in some ways, no. Like I said, we are consumers and we are contributors of innovation and software, open source software to the ecosystem. We are using the Cosmos stack as well. We are not reinventing the wheel. We're not building things from scratch. We have been using building blocks that already exist in the ecosystem, and the layers of innovation that we're adding on top are going to also be contributed back to the ecosystem as well. So in some ways, in some areas, we're actually taking the lead in innovating some of the aspects of the Cosmos stack and IBC and relaying and other areas that are like at the core of our platform and technology that will have to be improved, will have to be potentially made more scalable, and that is going to go back into the broader Cosmos ecosystem. We are part of the Cosmos family, so we're definitely supporting and engaging with many people in the Cosmos space as well, in the Cosmos ecosystem, Cosmosverse.
Yeah, I think the great thing about Cosmos is that everyone is a part of that family, and they're very welcoming to non-EVM chains, EVM chains, Ethereum, which is really refreshing. I kind of, as some of the godfathers of the multi-chain future, I think they really live and breathe the values of that. Final question is just, how are you defiant in your life? If we define that as kind of open resistance or bold disobedience, how would you say you're defiant?
Oh, that's I never thought about that actually. I feel like I've always been a bit of defiant of the norm. Never liked to be comfortable. Always wanted to challenge myself and challenge people around me. So maybe in that sense, that gives you an idea of defiance. I feel like if there are areas where we can do better, I'm gonna try to push myself and my team to go there and do better. I'm not necessarily a fan of the status quo. I feel like if things can be better or should be better in terms, you can think about anything: transparency, freedom, inclusion, whatever you want to call it. I will defy the norm, and I will try to. And this is kind of in my nature. I will try to see where we can do better and where we need to put more effort, and where we need leadership, where it might not exist, or it might be, let's say, maybe even now, looking at what the situation is in the market, right? I think we need stronger leadership, and I think we need to bring experienced leaders to take some to take some of this leading of the direction moving forward. SAGA, I think, is doing that, and I'm really fortunate to have such an experienced executive team to work with. That is definitely, leading the charge.
Amazing.
In Web3. So
I love that. Yep. And I think that crypto very much is a countercultural movement. So you're among many other rebels in this industry as well.
Yeah. If you think about it from that perspective, you're in Web3, you're already in a way defiant. You're defiant of the norm. You're defiant of the way things, the common settled ways of doing things.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on the Defiant. This was a great conversation, and I hope to chat to you again soon. Thanks so much, Bogdan.
Thank you again for having me, and it was a pleasure chatting with you. I'm looking forward to see where things go. But yeah, thanks again, and
thank you so much.
See you soon.
Cheers.